My name is Deborah Grayson Regal, and I have been a professional speaker and a speaking instructor for over 20 years. From my earliest beginnings as a high school national champion in public speaking and speech writing, to my role today as an international corporate trainer and a visiting professor of executive communications at Peking University, China, I have been collecting and using the best tips, tools, and techniques to help people present with more polish, power, and professionalism. The skills that I will be sharing with you are based on my own experience in instructing hundreds of thousands of speakers around the world. I hope that you will find them as helpful as they have, and I thank you for the opportunity to work with you. Hello, and thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. What a beautiful day it is, and I'm so happy to be sharing it with all of you. When it comes to opening a presentation, what I've just said is completely acceptable, extremely polite, and totally predictable. That's right. The typical opening remarks that most speakers make are benign and boring. They signal to the audience that what they are about to hear is nothing new or innovative or even interesting. Because even if you're getting ready to share the most incredible news in modern medicine, you have already lulled your audience into complacency. So, what separates the powerful, passionate introductions from those that are merely polite? It's about capturing your audience's attention the moment you begin to speak, and then keeping their attention throughout. Along with getting attention, a good opening also establishes your believability and credibility. Within the first minute of your presentation, you need to establish why you are the person to be delivering this message to this audience at this time. Of course, if you have someone to introduce you to your audience before you begin to speak, you can have that person highlight your personal and professional credentials. But if it's left up to you, you might need to list a few carefully selected highlights which can be expressed directly, such as in this example. I have a nursing degree from the University of Michigan, and I've spent the past 7 years working in the critical care unit of New York's Lenox Hill Hospital. You can also share your credentials indirectly through storytelling, such as in this example. Over the past 7 years in my role as a critical care nurse at New York's Lenox Hill Hospital, I have seen my share of trials and tribulations. But whether you take a head-on approach or a more roundabout way, you'll need to let your audience know the answer to why you. In addition to gaining attention and establishing credibility, your opening also needs to speak to the audience's WIFM. What'em? WIFM. W-I-I-F-M. This stands for What's in It for Me. Whether we like to admit it or not, we're all self-interested as listeners. We pay attention to those things that feel personally and professionally relevant, useful, and pressing, and ignore the rest. So a good opening establishes early on what about today's presentation is going to be relevant, useful, and pressing to this audience. If the audience isn't compelled to care, they're going to be looking for their first opportunity to tune you out. And it's your job to get them interested and invested. When making an introduction, you'll want to consider how much time you have. A good guideline is that your introduction should take up about 2 to 3 minutes of the presentation time, especially if you have a significant amount of content to follow. The relationship that you and your audience may or may not have at the start is also a factor for consideration. A smart way to get started is to poll the room, asking how many people are NPs, LPNs, social workers, or other allied professionals. You might then ask, who else is in the room with professions you haven't mentioned, and be welcoming of them as well. By knowing who is in the room, you can ensure that your examples and information are aimed at your audience and their clinical expertise. You also want to think about your audience's relationship to your topic, not just to you. If your listeners are already positively inclined to act on your message, then your introduction can take that into account. If you have a mixed opinion audience or a resistant audience, you may want to address this up front, such as, I know that today's topic may bring up a number of questions from you, and I want to let you know that I will address as many as I can in the time that we have today. That puts the audience at ease, and when the audience is relaxed, you can relax too. Finally, you'll want to consider your natural style when planning an introduction. Here are some possible ways to start your presentation off on the right foot, no matter what the topic is. Ask a question, either one that calls for a response or a rhetorical one. Asking the audience a question forces them to start thinking. It's creating an opening that they want and need to fill. Use today's date. If you happen to be speaking on the anniversary of 9/11, you need to acknowledge it. If you happen to be speaking on the day before everyone is leaving for Thanksgiving vacation, you need to acknowledge it. When there's something generally known about today's date, your introduction provides an appropriate opportunity for you to address something that you and your audience share, which is exactly how you can build rapport. Well, I can tell you that setting high expectations at the beginning of your presentation is the key to establishing rapport, connection, and credibility with your audience. And once you get them rooting for you, the rest of your presentation will go a lot more smoothly. Of course, all good things must come to an end, and your conclusion is where you make sure that you have left your audience feeling positive and with a clear call to action. A great conclusion recaps the main points of your presentation, brings the topic to a natural, satisfying close, includes a call to action when appropriate, and lets the audience know once and for all that you and they are done. Too often, we put plenty of time and thought into our introductions and the body of our presentations, but we don't plan for our wrap-up. Sometimes we run out of time or energy in the planning phase, and this bleeds into the presentation, where we simply run out of time or energy in the delivery. Isn't it a shame to have put so much work into your presentation only to leave the audience remembering your fizzle out at the end? That's a rhetorical question, by the way, a technique you can use not only in the opening, but in the closing as well. Your audience may likely remember best what you said last. Do you want them to remember you saying, I guess that's it? Do you want them to remember you coming to your conclusion and then discovering you had a few more points to make on previous slides? I bet not. As a polished presenter, you want your audience to remember you being in control of yourself, your content, and your time to the very end. You also want your audience to remember what you said and what you want them to do without any confusion or delay. Make sure that you present your final slides with power, polish, and professionalism, and with a positive tone to leave your audience feeling positive about you and your message.